Have you ever found yourself losing hours of your day trying to decipher why he acted that way, analyzing every word, every gesture, every silence, as if it were a puzzle that needs to be solved? If you're watching this video, you've probably experienced that mental exhaustion that comes when we try to control or fix a man's problematic attitudes. Carl Jung, the revolutionary Swiss psychoanalyst, had a fascinating perspective on this. He said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But here's the crucial point that most women don't understand. This understanding doesn't mean you should become responsible for his emotional shadows. Today, I'm going to share with you 4 profound insights from Jung that will completely transform how you deal with toxic masculine attitudes. I'm not talking about superficial manipulation techniques or cheap psychological games. I'm talking about an internal revolution that will give you genuine power. The power to not be affected by the emotional storms he tries to create around you. Because here's the truth no one tells you. When you stop reacting to his provocations, when you develop that conscious indifference that Jung so valued, something magical happens. You don't just protect yourself, you become magnetic in a completely new way. Get ready to discover how depth psychology can become your greatest ally in creating truly conscious relationships.
His shadow is not your responsibility. Let's start with a concept that will free you from years of unnecessary suffering. Jung developed the theory of the shadow, that part of the personality that contains everything a person rejects, denies, or hides from themselves. And here's what most women don't understand. His shadow is not your renovation project. Imagine the shadow as a dark, messy room inside the masculine psyche. It's filled with unprocessed anger, unfaced fears, unhealed traumas, and aspects of personality he considers unacceptable. When a man hasn't done the work of integrating his own shadow, he unconsciously projects this darkness onto the world around him, especially onto the women closest to him. Have you ever noticed how some men seem to dump their frustrations on you? How they can turn a simple conversation into an emotional battlefield? This isn't coincidence, it's shadow projection in action. Jung observed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But here's the twist. This applies to him, not to you. You are not responsible for making his unconscious conscious. You are not his therapist, his emotional mother, or his personal savior. When you take responsibility for his shadow, you're actually preventing his growth and sacrificing your own vital energy. It's like trying to carry 2 heavy backpacks on a steep trail. You'll exhaust yourself and still won't reach the destination. The conscious woman understands that each person has their own individuation journey, the process by which we become who we truly are. You can support, you can love, but you cannot do the inner work for him. And more importantly, you must not allow his unintegrated shadow to contaminate your own light. Think about it. When you stop trying to fix his attitudes, you free up an enormous amount of energy that can be redirected toward your own growth. It's like unplugging a device that was draining your battery without you realizing it.
The power of conscious indifference. Now we enter one of Jung's most powerful concepts for feminine empowerment, conscious indifference. This isn't the cold shoulder or passive-aggressive silence that many women resort to. This is something far more sophisticated and transformative. Jung spoke extensively about the process of disidentification, the ability to observe our emotions and reactions without being consumed by them. When applied to relationships, this becomes a superpower that most women never learn to wield. Picture this scenario. He comes home in a bad mood and starts picking fights over trivial things. The old you would either engage in the drama, trying to fix his mood, or absorb his negative energy like an emotional sponge. But the woman who understands conscious indifference, she observes his behavior with the detached curiosity of a scientist studying an interesting phenomenon. This isn't about becoming emotionally numb or uncaring. It's about developing what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold space for opposing forces without being torn apart by them. You can love him and not be affected by his emotional chaos. You can care about the relationship and refuse to participate in toxic dynamics. Let me give you a deeper understanding of how this works psychologically. When a man is projecting his shadow onto you, he's essentially trying to make you feel what he cannot allow himself to feel. His unconscious mind is saying, I can't handle this anger, this fear, this vulnerability, so I'll make her carry it instead. The moment you react emotionally to his provocation, you've taken the bait. You've agreed to carry his emotional burden. But conscious indifference breaks this unconscious contract. It's like refusing to catch a ball that someone throws at you. It simply falls to the ground where it belongs. Jung discovered that our psyche has an incredible capacity for what he called holding the tension of opposites. This means you can simultaneously care deeply about someone while remaining completely detached from their emotional drama. You can love him and not be affected by his emotional chaos. You can care about the relationship and refuse to participate in toxic dynamics. Here's a practical technique. When he starts displaying problematic behavior, imagine yourself surrounded by an invisible energetic boundary. His emotions hit this boundary and simply bounce back to him. You see them, you acknowledge them, but they don't penetrate your inner peace. The power of conscious indifference lies in its authenticity. You're not pretending not to care. You genuinely understand that his emotional state is not your responsibility. This creates a profound shift in the relationship dynamic. He can no longer use emotional manipulation to control your energy or attention. But here's the most fascinating part. When you stop reacting to his provocations, you often trigger what Jung called the return of the projection. He's forced to face his own emotions instead of making you carry them. This can lead to genuine growth, or it can reveal that he's not ready for a conscious relationship. Think of it as emotional aikido. Instead of meeting his force with force, you step aside and let his energy flow past you. This requires tremendous inner strength, but it's the kind of strength that comes from self-knowledge, not from building walls. If you're finding these insights valuable and want to dive deeper into Jung's revolutionary approach to feminine power in relationships, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. The next chapter reveals something even more profound about the hidden dynamics between masculine and feminine energy that most women never discover.
When your anima meets his shadow, this is where Jung's psychology becomes truly fascinating for women. He believed that every man carried within him an unconscious feminine aspect called the anima, his inner woman, if you will. This anima represents his capacity for emotion, intuition, and relational connection. But here's the crucial insight that changes everything. When a man hasn't developed a healthy relationship with his own anima, he projects it onto the women in his life. You become the container for all his unexpressed emotions, his unmet needs for nurturing, and his disowned sensitivity. Have you ever felt like you're expected to be his emotional translator? Like you're supposed to understand what he's feeling, even when he doesn't understand it himself? This is anima projection at work, and it's one of the most exhausting dynamics a woman can experience.
Jung observed that men who haven't integrated their anima often display what he called anima possession. They become moody, irrational, and emotionally volatile in ways that seem completely out of character. But instead of recognizing this as their own inner feminine demanding attention, they unconsciously expect the women around them to manage these emotions for them. Let me give you a deeper understanding of how this psychological mechanism works. The anima, when undeveloped, operates like an emotional parasite within the masculine psyche. It creates sudden mood swings, inexplicable irritability, and what Jung called inferior feeling function. The man experiences these emotions as foreign and threatening to his masculine identity, so he unconsciously seeks to externalize them. This is where you come in. Your natural feminine energy becomes a magnet for his projected anima. He unconsciously thinks, she's the emotional one, she should handle these feelings. But here's the psychological trap. The more you accept this projection, the more resentful he becomes toward you for making him feel things he doesn't want to feel. When your natural feminine energy encounters his unintegrated shadow, a toxic dance begins. He unconsciously tries to make you responsible for his emotional world while simultaneously resenting you for having the emotional intelligence he lacks. It's a psychological double bind that leaves you feeling confused and drained. Let me paint you a picture of how this plays out in real life. He comes home after a difficult day, but instead of processing his emotions internally, he becomes irritable and critical. When you try to help or show empathy, he pushes you away. When you give him space, he accuses you of not caring. This isn't conscious manipulation. It's his psyche trying to force you to carry what he cannot face in himself. Jung discovered that this dynamic creates what he called participation mystique, an unconscious psychological fusion where boundaries between two people become blurred. You start feeling responsible for his emotions, and he starts expecting you to regulate his inner world. This is not love, it's psychological codependence disguised as intimacy. The most insidious part of anima projection is how it masquerades as romantic connection. He might say things like, "You complete me," or "I need you to feel whole." While this sounds romantic, it's actually a red flag indicating that he hasn't done the work of integrating his own feminine side. A man with an integrated anima doesn't need you to complete him. He chooses you because he's already whole. He can access his own emotions, process his own feelings, and offer genuine emotional reciprocity. The difference is profound and unmistakable once you know what to look for. The empowered woman recognizes when she's being asked to play the role of his projected anima. She understands that his inability to access his own emotional depths is not her problem to solve. Instead of becoming his emotional caretaker, she models what integrated feminine energy looks like. This means honoring your own emotions without taking responsibility for his. It means expressing your needs clearly without trying to anticipate and meet all of his unspoken ones. It means being authentically feminine without becoming his emotional rehabilitation center. Here's a practical way to identify anima projection. Notice if you feel emotionally drained after interactions with him, especially when he's been moody or difficult. Ask yourself, am I carrying emotions that aren't mine? If the answer is yes, you're likely dealing with anima projection. Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But transformation should be mutual growth, not one person carrying the emotional burden for two." Here's what's truly revolutionary. When you stop accepting the projection of his anima, you force him to develop a relationship with his own inner feminine. This either catalyzes his psychological growth or reveals that he's not ready for a conscious relationship. Either outcome serves your highest good, because you're no longer sacrificing your authentic self to maintain a dynamic that serves no one. But there's one more layer to this that most women never discover, and it's the most powerful tool Jung ever developed for psychological protection. What I'm about to reveal in the final chapter will show you how to become completely immune to these projections while actually becoming more attractive and magnetic.
Individuation as your ultimate power. We arrive now at Jung's most profound gift to humanity, the concept of individuation. This is the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are, separate from the expectations, projections, and demands of others. For women dealing with problematic masculine behavior, individuation becomes your ultimate protection and your greatest source of power. Jung described individuation as the central concept of my psychology. It's the journey towards psychological wholeness, where you integrate all aspects of yourself, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious. When you're on this path, you become increasingly immune to the emotional manipulations and projections of others. Think of individuation as building an energetic fortress around your authentic self. This fortress isn't built from walls of defensiveness or emotional numbness. It's constructed from self-knowledge, personal boundaries, and an unshakable connection to your own inner wisdom. A woman who is individuating doesn't need external validation to know her worth. She doesn't need a man's approval to feel complete. She doesn't need to fix anyone else to feel valuable. This psychological independence is what Jung called standing on your own feet psychologically. But here's where it gets really powerful. Individuation doesn't make you less feminine or less loving. In fact, it makes you more authentically feminine because you're no longer performing femininity to please others. You're expressing it from your genuine core. Jung observed that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But most women never claim this privilege because they've been conditioned to define themselves through their relationships with others, especially men. Individuation breaks this psychological dependency. Let me give you a concrete example of how this works. An individuating woman might say to a man displaying toxic behavior, "I can see you're struggling with something, and I have compassion for that. But I won't allow your struggle to become my emotional burden. I'm here if you want to have a genuine conversation, but I won't participate in drama or manipulation." This response comes from a place of centered power, not reactive emotion. It acknowledges his humanity while maintaining clear boundaries. It offers connection without codependence. This is what Jung meant when he spoke about holding the tension of opposites. The individuating woman understands that her primary relationship is with herself. She knows that the quality of all her external relationships depends on the quality of her internal relationship. When you're deeply connected to your own psyche, you become like a tuning fork. You can immediately sense when someone is trying to pull you into their unconscious patterns. Jung discovered that individuation creates what he called psychological immunity. Just as your body develops immunity to diseases it has encountered, your psyche develops immunity to psychological manipulations and projections once you've learned to recognize them. This doesn't mean you become cold or uncaring. It means you develop the capacity to love without losing yourself. You can offer support without becoming enmeshed. You can be present for someone's pain without taking it on as your own. Here's the paradox that Jung understood. The more individuated you become, the more attractive you become to psychologically healthy people, and the less attractive you become to those who want to use you for their own unconscious purposes. Individuation acts like a natural filter for relationships. The process of individuation requires what Jung called the courage to be disliked. You must be willing to disappoint people who expect you to carry their emotional burdens. You must be willing to be seen as selfish by those who benefit from your self-sacrifice. This courage is what separates the conscious woman from the unconscious one. But perhaps most importantly, individuation gives you access to what Jung called the self, the archetype of wholeness and wisdom that exists in every human being. When you're connected to yourself, You have an internal compass that always points toward your highest good. You don't need to analyze every situation or second-guess every decision because you have direct access to your own inner knowing. The journey of individuation is not always easy, but it's the only path to genuine freedom and authentic power. And when you understand how to apply these principles practically in your daily life, everything changes.
Let's bring all of this together into something you can actually use starting today. Jung's psychology isn't just theoretical. It's a practical roadmap for reclaiming your power in relationships and in life. Remember, his shadow is not your responsibility. You are not here to fix, heal, or complete anyone else. Your job is to become who you truly are, and that process alone will transform every relationship in your life. The power of conscious indifference gives you the ability to love without losing yourself. You can care deeply while remaining centered in your own truth. This isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming sovereign. When you understand anima projection, you can recognize when someone is trying to make you responsible for their emotional world. You can offer compassion without becoming enmeshed. You can support without sacrificing yourself. And through individuation, you develop the ultimate protection, an unshakable connection to your own authentic self. This makes you immune to manipulation while making you magnetic to those who are ready for genuine connection. Here are 3 practical steps you can take immediately. First, start noticing when you feel emotionally drained after interactions. Ask yourself, whose emotions am I carrying? If they're not yours, consciously give them back. Second, practice the pause. When someone tries to provoke a reaction, take a breath and ask, is this about me or is this their shadow speaking? Respond from your center, not from your triggers. Third, commit to your own individuation journey. Spend time alone, journal, reflect. Develop a relationship with your own inner wisdom that's stronger than your need for external approval. Jung believed that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But this terror is also your liberation. When you accept yourself completely, you become immune to anyone who tries to make you feel incomplete. The conscious woman doesn't try to change men. She changes herself, and everything else follows. She doesn't seek power over others. She claims power over her own life. She doesn't wait for someone else to complete her. She becomes whole on her own. This is your invitation to step into that power, to become the woman who is so centered in her own truth that she becomes a force of nature, the woman who loves deeply but never loses herself, the woman who transforms every relationship simply by being authentically who she is. If this resonated with you, subscribe for more insights into the psychology of conscious relationships. And let me know in the comments which of these 4 concepts hit you the deepest. Your journey of individuation starts with that moment of recognition.